Hey everyone, I'm JD Park, and this is One Stop Real Estate. I wanted to do a quick introduction for this podcast. I am interviewing Andrew Hartman. He's the founder of Time Boss. And in this episode, we talk about time management and a bunch of tips and tricks to help get your life organized and things like that. So I hope you enjoy. Andrew, I kind of wanted you to give the introduction on this. Tell us a little bit about your company, where you guys reside, and then what kind of customers that you guys service.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So time management is a training and coaching company that helps people take control of their time to get the results they want with no anxiety or burnout required. That's really the big focus. So everyone listening to this podcast is up to something big in their world. They want to see that preferred future happen. And sometimes in process of heading that direction, we either burn too hot or we're overwhelmed by the sheer amount of things that we need to get done, and it leads to anxiety or burnout, or we just see diminished results in what we're trying to make happen. And we're trying to help people get past that. We're trying to help people get the results they want with no anxiety, burnout, or required. Primary way we do that is through content online. There's all kinds of Time Boss content out there. For people that need additional help, they often jump into coaching groups or one-on-one coaching, and we help them really get over the hump and make some powerful change. Times like money or fitness or anything like that, where sometimes the habits are really, really ingrained. We've lived into those habits literally for decades sometimes. And for some people, they can easily self-implement. For others, they just need a little bit of help. We're like personal trainers for time to help people get past that and move into whatever that new world they want to live in.
Awesome. Do you guys do your coaching online? Is it in person? What coaching do you guys do?
95% online, people all over the country, sometimes all over the world. But yeah, people that just are up to something, having a struggle getting there, having a hard time with anxiety and burnout, trying to make those big goals happen, and we just help them get over the hump.
Awesome. So when you were starting the company, what made you want to go towards coaching? Was there products out there that you've tried, or was it just something that you had struggled with that you wanted to fix?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one, it was 100% what I struggled with that I wanted to fix. So late 20s, had a job that I was utterly overwhelmed by. I really wanted to do well, but there were so many things to do. And like any, executive or business owner or founder, there's always more to do than you have time to do it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a framework thinking about that, you're just going to get overwhelmed. You'll start working on one thing and you'll be overwhelmed on the 12 things you're not doing. And that was me. That was my process. So some pretty classic flame out burnouts. Classic story I've told a lot of places. I actually lost my sense of smell for 6 months. I was so overwhelmed by stress and literally made my senses fry.
Wow.
Pre-COVID, it was a decade before COVID. And I just resolved that, I had a young family, I had a marriage I was really interested in keeping, and I decided it can't be like this. It's got to be different. So that began a process for me, ultimately solved it for myself. I was a COO of companies and ended up installing the same habits with my teams, and they started making massive contribution without anxiety or burnout.
Yeah.
And coaching really developed organically. People just kept leaning in and asking me to show them what I was doing, and had a buddy, my buddy Ange, who said, you should try launching a coaching group. Like, you could probably multiply your impact. And if this many people are asking you to coach them, there's probably a lot more people out there that are interested. So we actually launched it on a whim on LinkedIn a year and a half ago, March 2023.
That's sweet.
Filled up instantly. Launched a second group, filled up instantly. And we're like, okay, there's something here. Like, there's something that's really resonating with people, and we've just rode the horse in the direction it's going since then. So that's
awesome.
where we are.
So you were still working at a business, at a company, while you were learning and implementing these on the side in your team, and you had this organic outreach saying, "Hey, will you teach us?" That's awesome.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So it was a unexpected, total gift for me. It's one of those things I would have told you 2 years ago that I would have been the executive of like a COO for early stage companies for the rest of my life. That was my path. That's what I'd done. And then this little side path opened, and it just captured my heart in terms of the modality of helping people, what becomes possible for people if they get their relationship with time right. It's so powerful. I joke that it's like when you help someone get their relationship with time right, it's like their foot was in a bear trap and they had no idea. And you open up the bear trap and they're like, oh my gosh, I can walk on 2 feet. Like their whole world is different. Time is so, like our relationship with time is so fundamental to how we experience life that I live for that moment when someone gets it right. 6 months later, they come back and they tell me all the things that are possible for them now. It's just, I could live on that forever. So,
Yeah. So when you talk about time and your relationship with time,
right.
How would you say your relationship with time is different than an average person? And then also, how would a high net worth individual's time be different than an average person's?
Yeah, it's really good. Well, that's a fascinating question, JD. I really like that question a lot. So I think everyone has the same time available to them. You, me, Elon Musk, we all have 24 hours in the day. We have to sleep some amount of that day. And so my fundamental belief is that anything that we want is a discrete series of steps away from wherever we are right now. And so what I've done with time is I really look at it like a currency. It is a finite currency, a finite valuable currency that I've taken the stock of. And I think for most people, they're just kind of constantly throwing themselves at their day. They're throwing themselves at their to-do list. They're not really sure how far they're going to make it, but they're just shoveling as fast as they can. And the challenge is we often can accomplish much less than we think we can in a given day. So we finish that day, we got a couple items checked off on our to-do list, but we see all the items we didn't check off. And then we start telling ourselves really poor stories like there's not enough time, or I'm bad at time, or time is my enemy, or all these negative self-talk that compounds over time where people just end up having this adversarial relationship with time. And for me, I mean, the alternative way I look at it is time's an asset. I only have so much of it, which means I'm a portfolio manager, that I have to be very thoughtful of how do I deploy this time for the things that I want, and then get really, 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 really clear on what I have the capacity to do and what I don't have the capacity to do. And the things I don't have the capacity to do, I have to figure out what to do with that. And I think any high net worth individual that is really taking stock of their time, my guess is they're operating this way. They know the things that they want. They know what they have the resources to do, and the things that don't fit, they've mitigated. They're either delegating, or they're deferring those items out. They're saying, not right now. Right now, I'm going to focus on these things in particular. Or they're just saying, you know what? I'm just not going to do those things. They are laser focused with the currency they have on the future that they want. I think that's the key difference.
Yeah. No, I like how you said that you're a portfolio manager of your time and you are now managing assets.
Yeah.
When it comes to managing those things that are thrown at you, like whatever it is, you have a new deadline, your boss is throwing something else at you.
Right.
How do you decide what to delegate, what not to? And I know that there's a system out there called the Eisenhower matrix.
Right.
What are your thoughts and opinions on the Eisenhower matrix? Do you use it? Do you not use it? And
Yeah, I use it lightly. I think it's a helpful rule of thumb for people. The thing that the Eisenhower matrix doesn't deal with is capacity. So if everything's in that urgent important bucket and you've got 16 hours of urgent and important items that you need to get done in the next 24 hours, you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah. It just feels as overwhelming as to-do list.
Yeah. So to me, you have to have a framework. You've got to have a way of thinking about it. And so a key way I navigate that, the first principle one is that your calendar is your to-do list. So if you think about it in terms of portfolio management, your calendar is truly the inventory of time that you have, right? It's a visualization of the time available to you. And so by making it your to-do list, you're literally mapping the work that you need to get done to that to-do list. And then it's very clear when you're out of time. Like you can literally decide. So in the Time Boss program, the first thing that we encourage people to do is just decide how much of your life you want to give to whatever this area of life it is. So I personally give 50 hours a week to income generating activities. That's what I would call it. That is my capital to deploy, if you will, in the temporal realm. That is my portfolio that I'm managing. So uh, once I fill that time, I now have to decide, what do I do with the things that don't fit? So that's when I start delegating. And the things that I keep are the things that are the highest leverage that will have the most impact that only I can do. Those are the things that stay on my list. Everything else is going to someone else, or I'm going to defer it into next week. I'm just going to say not this week. An additional principle there that's really important is not over planning that week. So I encourage people to insert what we call in Time Boss whirlwind, which is 20 to 40% of your week should be buffer, should be just availability for the chaos of life. Could be emails, could be phone calls, could be Slack, Teams, could be your water heater breaks, could be your kids get sick, all the things that happen. And right now, those things are already happening anyway in your calendar, and they're just crashing in on top of your priorities all the time. And so I simply encourage people to try to separate those worlds out as much as they can and have a little bit of buffer to deal with reality. And then your question, if your boss throws something at you and you're already out of time, you know, in that type of scenario, I think you're just working with relationships, and you go to your boss and you say, absolutely, I would love to help. Here's all the things I'm currently prioritized. Where would you rank this thing that you just gave me? Where do you think that fits? And they're like, it's number one. You're like, oh, great, no problem. Number one. Okay, I'm going to slide. So we're doing this together. I'm going to slide all these down. And this one on the bottom, I'm not going to be able to get to that one because we're just out of time. Are we all okay with that? Yeah. That's totally fine. Yeah, dude, let's do it. But
Yeah.
again, you're always dealing with a currency. It is a zero sum asset where if I give time to this thing, I must take time from something else. You're not just piling on more things. That's when people get overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've heard you talk about burnout before.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like it's a recipe for burnout.
Absolutely.
How do you avoid burnout? Is it through your calendar, your weekly planning? What is the most effective way that you've seen to avoid burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So burnout's a function of two things. One, burnout is overwork where you're literally mentally taxing your brain. Your brain can't handle it. It's too much overload. And two, it is the story that you tell yourself about that work. So I begin to burn out when narratively I'm looking at all the work I'm doing and I feel hopeless about it, or I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. It's no longer I just need to get past this project. Every project is like this. You feel stuck. That's when people burn out. So your brain's exhausted and you don't think there's a way out. And so for me, the two antidotes there are, one is, what we've already talked about around weekly planning. Like, you just have to be really clear about what you can actually achieve. The language we use in Time Boss is highest sustainable pace. And your pace, JD, is different than my pace. My guess is just from our age difference, like, you probably can run a lot harder than I can at this point, right? I mean, when I was young, I could go hard and long.
Yeah.
But again, it changes over time. And even people my own age would have a different pace. But the idea is that you're trying to find, what is that pace, the highest pace that I can sustain. So for me, I found it's about 50 hours, because my work during those 50 hours nothing's monotonous. It's all deep thinking, deep work, high leverage stuff. And if I try to push beyond that, it's just diminishing returns. And I can tell. I've just paid attention long enough. And by running a weekly planning meeting every week, I can stop and reflect and say, hey, do I think I could do more? Or, man, I should really downshift. But it's this course correct week over week where you find that high sustainable pace. That's how you deal with capacity. And on the story side, I mean, I think we just have to take ownership of our thoughts, right? If you're in a role where they are constantly calling you after 6 p.m. while you're trying to put your kids to bed or something, and you feel burnt by that, you feel really annoyed by that, and you're not doing anything about it, that is now on you. Like, you are fully responsible for your life. And I think for those individuals, if they don't take action there in the story that they tell themselves about work, that will ultimately drag them down, and they will burn out as well. So I think it's both understanding your capacity and then being really mindful of the story that you tell yourself about work. I think both of those things have to change for people not to burn out.
Yeah. And I imagine that when you go through coaching sessions, not everybody's going to be the same. Everybody has their own set of problems. How do you handle identifying what someone's problems are and then working through those problems with that individual?
Yeah, that's really good. That's a great question, JD. You're asking really great questions. So time loss my background is COO of early stage companies, and early stage companies are very practical. And so you don't keep anything that doesn't work. It's short runways, high pressure, you've got to perform. And so Time Boss developed into this framework of habits, a very simple set of habits. It's a weekly planning meeting and a daily review meeting. And what's really powerful about that is everybody applies the same fundamentals to start. And then their whatabouts, their gotchas, their friction are their unique areas where they've got things that are holding them back from getting them the life they want. So for some people, it's I have to be constantly available all the time, or my job won't work. And so they're constantly being interrupted by other people, and that is often a symptom of one, an inappropriate idea of how time works, but two, often it's an identity issue where they get a lot of self-worth from just being a firefighter. And so we're having a very specific conversation about what are the outcomes you're responsible for, what's the life you want to live, and what are ways that we can deconstruct however you're doing it for it to be different. For another person, we might install this set of habits and they just keep working. So they get really good at making things happen, but they don't have a governor for themselves, right? They'll work 16 hours a day because they're like, oh my gosh, this framework makes me so productive. I can get so much done. And then the question becomes, well, is that the life that you want to live, right? What is the stick that's at your heels that's driving you to work 16 hours a day? Is there another way that you can achieve the outcomes that you want without you being required 16 hours a day? So again, once the framework's overlaid, the gotchas kind of present themselves, and then we just coach against the gotchas.
Yeah, especially for real estate agents where they're in a commission-based job, it's really like running your own business, where they'll schedule out 6 days a week because some people can only see homes on Saturdays, and then
Right.
after hours, and then during that middle time, you're doing your prospecting. How would you recommend setting boundaries, and what an idea is for a healthy schedule of work to play to fun? Like, how many hours should you be working today that you've seen? And I know it's not going to be the same for everybody, but just a general rule of thumb, how many hours you should be working and relax.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a really tough question, JD. And I know you don't want me to hear me say this, but it truly is all relative.
Yeah.
There have been people that have gone to the Time Boss program that work 4 hours a day that are burning out. And there are people that have gone through that work 12, 13 hours a day, and their heart is on fire and they're doing the best work of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it really depends on your relationship with work. That's why, to me, this idea of high sustainable pace is so critical. Like, you kind of have to apply yourself to the process, pay attention to the results. If you finish a week and you're like, you know what, I think I can work a little bit more and stay in a healthy range, crank it up a notch.
Yeah.
And you get to the end of the week and you're reflecting, you're like, I am burning too hot. The stakeholders in my life, my spouse, my kids, my community, they're chirping because they're not getting what they want from me. Okay, I think I'm going a little too hot. I need to crank back.
Yeah.
But really, it is important for each individual to name the life that they want. Work is obviously critical. These agents are trying to grow a business, create a legacy. There's a lot of reasons why I'm sure it's important to them. And the question is, in the portfolio of my life, this is a part of my life, what else is important? Okay, my family relationships are important, or my relationship with my church is important, or my relationship with my health is important. And so you're really, again, portfolio management, you're thinking of it like that portfolio where how do I ensure all of these things are successful? I'm not just single tasking this one area of my life and letting it take over everything. But to me, that's the power of the weekly meeting, where that is a moment of intense reflection where James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about 1 degree course corrections. You're making that 1 degree course correction week over week over week to find your high sustainable pace. And I think it is going to be different for everyone. The one thing I would love to just to add a thought on that, JD, for people. So let's say as a real estate agent, you've been working 60 hours a week and you're like, I'm burning my relationships. I haven't been to my kid's baseball game in a month, whatever. We all have these narratives we tell ourselves. And you say, I need to crank back. What I'm not saying to people is just work less. That's not what time management is. It's understanding the outcomes you're responsible for and understanding the resources you have and the time that you have personally, and then figuring out, how do I make those two things cross? So it may mean that you need a virtual assistant, or it may mean that you need to massively upgrade your prospecting skill set, where you are looking for higher leverage deals with less time that you're going to give yourself. So again, it's not just working less, it's holding your outcome steady and saying, if I were to have less hours in my day that I'm giving to my business, what high leverage tasks might I prioritize to still get me those outcomes?
Yeah.
That's the fundamental to it.
Yeah. No, I love how you're putting these questions to yourself. What I'm noticing is, instead of having set rules being like, oh, well, Andrew told me I need to work 10 hours a day, yada, yada,
Right.
yada, you are saying, ask yourself these questions, and then
Right.
you will have the answers for your own set of blueprints of what you should be following that works best for you. Because with the end in mind of what type of life you're wanting to live,
Right.
it's going to give you the answers of what is required in order to accomplish those things. No, I absolutely love
Yeah.
that.
Well, and to extend on that, JD, I think why people don't like it is because it's the same reason why starting a business is hard, right? Like, when, as you started your business, you tested a bunch of things and you've run with the winners and you killed the losers. And our relationship with time is no different. Each week is essentially a test where you're saying, okay, if I do it this way, what kind of experience do I have? Do I get the outcomes I want? And then you're just making adjustments week over week. So if you can lock into a weekly habit in being just reflective about how you're managing your time, almost necessarily you will make progress. But there's no way you're going to get it right next week. It's impossible.
Yeah.
We learn by doing. You have to do the work.
Yeah. I've noticed that social media has become more and more of a prevalent thing in our world, and which can be a plus side for businesses. But
Sure.
as a consumer, it may not always be a plus side. So you catch yourself scrolling. What are some ways, some tips or tricks that you've seen to have either self-discipline or kind of create barriers so that you can start to fix those bad habits?
Right. So yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of things. I'll start very practical, and then we'll work backwards to why we are all quasi addicted to social media. But very practically, I think for our habits to change, we often need to change the incentives that are driving that habit. So right now, it's really easy for us to open up our phone and just start scrolling. Right? There's literally no friction between that activity, and the social media platforms want to make it as easy as possible to get us there, and that will never leave.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, it's TikTok, Netflix. These platforms all see each other as competitors for the amount of time our eyeballs are looking at their screen. So, given that, we have to change the motivation. One way we do that is James Clear in Atomic Habits calls it a habit contract. I call it an accountability. And the idea is this, that I am going to be accountable to something. So I might say to you, JD, I'm only going to be on social media 10 minutes a day. And I'm going to prove that to you every day by sending you a screenshot of my screen time on my iPhone or Android, where you can see I only spent 10 minutes on social media. And if I don't, I'm going to do something really painful for me. Like, I'm going to donate $500 to my least favorite political candidate publicly, where my name's on the register.
Uh-huh.
And I guarantee you, if I make that commitment to you, or you make that commitment to me, you will not be on social media more than 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Because you've now changed the incentive structure of what's driving the behavior. You are way more motivated to not do it. You've created a ton of friction between you and scrolling on social media. Now, that only works short term. That only works as a jump start to change a habit. Eventually, your brain will totally rebel. I'd go back and be like, dude, that was stupid when I said that. I shouldn't have said that. Will you just let me out of that? We'll look for ways to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Those tools work as to create margin for us to make real and lasting change. And so when we think about real and lasting change, and you think about social media, what social media does is it gives you a dopamine hit every time we go there. It just gives our brain what it wants. It's like sugar for our brain, right? And some of that comes from the reason why we choose it, when we know, like, I should be prospecting, or I should be calling and inviting people to this open house I have this weekend, whatever. We will choose social media because it's a quicker hit, right? I don't know if I do this prospecting for this next hour, I don't even know if it's worth my time. I don't even know if it's going to work. I'm not getting the results that I want right now. our brain is literally just looking to not be bored, right? It's looking for us to get that sugar hit. So the way that we mitigate that is challenging, but is possible. You almost have to gamify the alternative, right? One of the things we do in Time Boss is we talk about taking any big goal and breaking it down into manageable chunks. There's a platform called Commit Action, and they talk about this idea of the action result gap. If I take an action, it takes me a long time to see the result. I'm going to be way less committed to that action. But if I take an action, I see a result immediately or near immediately, I'm way more likely to take the action. That's why we love social media. If I open TikTok, the result is going to be I'm going to see something in the first couple swipes that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So if we apply that same principle to our work, maybe it's that we are going to say, hey, I'm going to do 20 minutes of prospecting, and then I'm going to take my dog for a walk. Or I'm going to do 30 minutes of prospecting, and then I'm going to go get a drink at Starbucks, get one of my favorite drinks. You're literally creating the same type of structure where your brain is much more likely to take that action because of your relationship with that action. Additional things you can do is you can add deadlines. You can say, by the end of the day today, I need to make 20 phone calls. I can simply be accountable to you. I could say, hey, JD, by the end of the day today, I'm going to make 20 phone calls. Hold me to it. The science shows that just by me telling you what my goal is, I'm much more likely to stay focused. And so if I create those types of structures for myself, I'm less likely to turn to social media because I've created an intent that now you're aware of as well, that I'm way more likely to stick to it.
Yeah.
But personally, I think you should just delete all the apps off your phone and never go back. They are they just want to addict you. That's all they want. They want you in their world all day long, and they're really good at it. So
yeah,
you're up against the most well-paid data scientists in the world, and you're probably gonna lose that game. So I would say just delete them and don't even give yourself the option. But that's just me.
Yeah, you mentioned something about you have to do a negative, right? Like either give $500 to a charity. I was actually learning about this in a training not too long ago where they were talking about a carrot and a stick. And the carrot is an incentivizer, it's a reward for doing something, and you receive a benefit. And then the stick it's a fear. It's a fear-based model of driving you to do something, whether it's not being able to pay your rent or having to publicly do something kind of shameful. Which one is a better, longer lasting motivator? I know that people that are successful, most of them have a story of a fear-based or something where they hit rock bottom and it changes them more permanently. Have you seen that to be more effective than, you're just going to get this reward?
Yeah. So loss aversion is about 4 times. I think it's 4 times more powerful than the desire for gain. So we're way more likely to change our behavior. Long term, I do think it has to switch. Think of it like I don't know how familiar you are with SpaceX or rockets, but rockets have first stages and second stage. There's a very powerful first stage that gets them to a certain level of orbit, and there's a second stage that keeps them in orbit. It kind of thrusts them into a different orbit. And I think you have to think of loss like that first stage. It's similar to the accountability idea, the idea of giving to the political candidate you don't like, as an example. That creates margin. That it's a pattern interrupter, right? I've spent so much time on social media recently. I got to interrupt my pattern. But eventually, the other engine has to kick in where you're like, oh, my life is way better if I'm not on social media. I'm happier. I'm not as angry. I'm not as distracted. So it's the same with Time Boss. So running a weekly planning meeting is kind of like cleaning your room. It's awesome when it's done and you like having a clean room, but sometimes in the middle of it, you're like, golly, I just want to go do something else.
Yeah.
But once you do it enough, it is a real ratchet moment where you think, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to live. This is the way I want to live. I get the life I want if I plan for my future self. That's the whole idea. The word Time Boss comes from this idea that you're the boss of your future self. You're literally setting that person up to be successful by how you plan for them. And again, back to your point, I think long term, you have to go from loss aversion to the gain you receive from taking that action, because I think, again, I think we'll just rebel long term against loss aversion. We'll just quit. We'll do something else. It just won't be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, in my personal life, from my past experiences, I've seen where I've been in a spot where things have been tight financially and I've had some sort of loss aversion to motivate me. But then once that negative is gone, I sit comfortably and I stop doing the activities that are continuing my growth and continuing my career. So from what you're saying, it totally aligns with my personal experience.
Yeah.
When it comes to deep work and getting in the zone, what are some things that can be helpful to protect that time? Is it setting out a notification to everybody saying, hey, don't interrupt me during this time? And how much of that time is effective? I mean, not effective, but useful, because at some point your efficiency kind of tapers off. How long can you go with effectively working?
Yeah, great question. So 2 thoughts there. One is, to your first question, any priority you have, the language we use in Time Boss is shielding. You have to shield it. And the mental model of a shield is, a shield does not eliminate the weapon that's being shot at you. The shield simply protects you from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reality is, you have to expect kids are going to get sick, water heater's going to break, phone's going to ring, client's going to have a need, email's going to go, whatever, those things are coming. So yeah, to your point, you really have to prep a place to really do that deep work. So I think, number one, I think it starts with notifications. Most people have too many notifications on their phone. So both Android and iPhone allow you to use what's called focus modes, where you can dramatically reduce the amount of things that come through. You can limit it to, for me, I have a mode where I limit it to just my wife, my kids, and my parents and my wife's parents. That's it. So the people that they break through, likely if they're calling me on the phone, it's a big issue, Yeah. So certainly I have the ability to hyper focus. If I know a stakeholder has a risky relationship, so let's say let's say you have a client that you're like, I can't go in focus mode because if that client calls, I've got to be available. Well, we actually do this all the time, right? If you were in a meeting with a more important client than that client, and the less important client called, you wouldn't leave the meeting, right? That client would just have to wait. And so, or if I go on a date with my wife and someone calls, that's certainly not my wife, I'm not going to take that call because I want to be fully present to my wife. So we have the ability all the time to be uninterruptible. And so in those instances, what I recommend to people is just go to those stakeholders that you're concerned about and say, hey, I've got a number of big projects right now, but I want to make sure I'm available to you. If you have a need, you email me, I will get back to you within a couple hours, no problem at all. If it's absolutely on fire, like if you need it that second, would you please call me on the phone? 95% of the time, it won't be on fire. Yeah. 95% of the time, they'll just put in your email. And then if you're managing your notifications, all you have to do is ignore your email and you'll be able to get to that deep work spot. So I do think managing notifications, managing your environment, if you've got small kids, work from home is probably not a great place for you to do deep work. Like figure out a babysitter if your spouse can handle it, or if there's another way, if you have another parent that you can trade kids for a day or something. You just got to do the work to really shield your ability to focus. And then to your point, once you get into focus, it really varies. Average person can do about 90 minutes super deep. You'll have some people that can do much longer, and you'll have some people that can do much shorter. Again, this is one of those high sustainable pace things where I think as you pay attention, you'll figure it out. You're like, okay, I can do about 45 minutes. Great. When I look at my week, when I do a weekly planning meeting, I'm going to map in as many 45-minute periods as I can, where I'm going to protect that time. I'm going to shield it, and that'll get me exactly what I need. But again, I think that really comes from paying attention.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, I think I've got quite a few golden nuggets from you today. That's what we were going for. Are there any last tips or tricks that you'd like to let everybody know about, or something that you'd like to leave before we hop off the podcast?
Yeah, as you said, there's so many. We have a free masterclass for Time Boss. It's a 90-minute video that walks people through the entire framework. So if any of this struck today, I'd recommend doing that. It takes 90 minutes. You can watch it on 2 times speed in 45 minutes. It gives you the entire model. And if you get into accountability with someone and say, hey, let's do this together, my guess is you will be very successful at moving forward in it. That's what I'd recommend. So if you go to timeboss.us, hit the resources tab, and you'll see the 90-minute masterclass.
And I'll also put that in the description of
Cool.
the video as well. So if you
Great.
guys want to listen to that, you can have it there. So
Awesome.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, JD. I love your questions, man. Really great questions. Thank you so much.
The One Stop Real Estate Podcast is a production of Vision Real Estate.